All right, from the beginning. My name's Friday. I carry a badge.
Now on Xfinity 187.
Hi, I'm John Malos, and welcome to this first show of Connect with Me on MeTV Fresno for 2014. Happy New Year. Today we're talking to a historian, an author, a television producer. If you like the railroad, you're going to like our show today. 436 MeTV option 11. Remember, do not wade through the message and turn down the sound on your TV set if you call in. We're back with our guest, the first show of 2014. Glad to have you along. Hope you had a great new year. Of course, 2014 upon us now. I'm kind of glad to get rid of 2013, to be honest with you. Not that it was a bad year. It was a pretty good year. But, 13 just doesn't set well with me. I just don't like the number 13. So now we're past it. Don't have to worry about it for another 100 years. And we all know we'll still be here in 100 years, right? Anyway, Happy New Year to you all. Thank you for being a part of this program. This is actually our, we're going to be entering our third year here shortly. Well, anyway, we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic today. I'm very much in favor of preserving history. I love history. In fact, when I first heard that the old Yankee Stadium was going to be torn down, and then that they were actually talking about the possibility of tearing down Fenway Park, I almost had a stroke, ladies and gentlemen. And, these things, we need to preserve them. So when you're talking about history and you talk about California, look no further than Sacramento, California, the capital. This state of ours, California, has so much history surrounding the railroad. And look no further, of course, as I said, 176 miles north of us, talking about the building and the start of the Transcontinental Railroad. Let's go to the videotape. I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. There's the great city of Sac. You can enjoy the history of the railroad, all thanks to a brand new book and a DVD called The Hidden Wonder of the World, the Transcontinental Railroad from Sacramento to Donner Summit. And you talk about men moving mountains, my friends. That's exactly what they did back in the 1860s when they used a pick and a shovel and black powder to blast their way through the Sierra Nevada mountains. Backbreaking work, to say the least, all for the purpose of laying down those first tracks. And the book retraces each historic site, stop by stop, from Sacramento to places like Roseville, Auburn, Winters, Rainbow, Clipper Gap, and through to Sparks, Nevada. Although nothing is there to really mark the spot where the first rails were laid down, the book and the DVD focus on Old Town Sac, where it all began and beyond. Remember, this is the very same place where the Pony Express, the Gold Rush, and the Transcontinental Railroad all began. Live in our studio right now is Bill George. He is the author of the new book, Rails, Tales, and Trails, a step-by-step secret locations of the Central Pacific Railroad. He is also a writer, a television producer, and an old friend from way back when, back in the early 80s, early to mid 80s in Sacramento, California at the NBC affiliate. We worked together at KCRA TV. Excited to talk about the railroad. 436 MeTV option 11. Remember, recently we've had some problems with callers calling in and they don't turn down the sound. So if you do that, we can't take the call because we cannot hear you, ladies and gentlemen. We're glad to have you along on this very first day of 2014 for our show. We're back with our guest, Bill George, in just a momento. Stay tuned.
When you like Ventura TV Appliance on Facebook, it's nice. But when you love the Samsung big screen we deliver, it's even better. Our website is cool, and it's a good place to start. But you really should touch the merchandise before you buy. Time for that upgrade to an HD 3D web-enabled Samsung TV. Get the best selection, price, and service in town without waiting. Come in to Ventura TV Appliance and touch the merchandise today.
I love history, and I can't say I'm a historian. I'm kind of an amateur historian. There's no question about it. But I love old historical things. That's why I like traveling on the East Coast. You can see all those buildings and monuments that were built hundreds of years ago. Well, not that long ago, but I mean, it was a lot longer than we've been around. Anyway, my guest today is Bill George, talking about the railroad. Hi, Bill. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Hey, it's good to see. I am such in favor of preserving history, and I don't know if you are, but
absolutely.
I love history. And I'm not a student of history, but I'm kind of an amateur buff when it comes to history. I don't know. Are you the same?
Yeah, but I turned my kind of hobby into a profession here, and wrote a book and did the movie on the old Central Pacific Railroad that went from Sacramento to Donner's Summit. And the reason I chose that was built in the 1860s by hand, and people said that it could not be done at the time with the technology that they had, or the lack of technology, I should say. And so it was quite a feat. It put Sacramento and actually California connected to the rest of the nation. It really made what we have today. And the Fresno tie-in is that once the Central Pacific was built, and that railroad became the Southern Pacific Railroad, and they of course put the rail lines down through the Central Valley, created towns like Fresno and Visalia, and made all this agriculture possible down in the great Central Valley, the same people that built the Central Pacific Railroad and opened up California.
I want to put the book and the DVD up on the screen. We took a picture of it, and I don't know what they're I have 2 young kids, and I'm not sure what grade they start teaching history. What is it, 4th, 5th grade,
I think it's 4th grade in California.
4th grade in California, but this is part of our history, part of our culture. That's the book on the right. The DVD is on the left. It's about 34 minutes long. I looked at the DVD yesterday twice. It is something that really is an educational tool for all of your kids to learn about the railroad. Bill, why is it so important, do you think, to know about our railroad system?
Well, because it was this incredible feat that people, again, did not think could be done.
Yeah.
And it was Sacramentans and people from Sacramento that actually invested the money, hired the talent, and then did the hands-on work to do it. And it's such a connection point to us. Sacramento, probably would be the state capital's there, which has always been a boom for them. But this really made modern California. And I just think when you can go and you can actually see the cuts and the fills and the tunnels that are all still there today, you can put your hands on it. That really connects, especially with young people. And I think in the age of Facebook and YouTube and everything, not to denigrate those, but kids' attention spans are shorter, and you really have to get them involved and interested in the topic. So if you can take them and show them, and with the film even see it on the film, then they connect to it.
Is there an appetite for this? And if so, how do you know there's an appetite?
Well, I know because I've been doing it for 2 years, and I've spoken to more than 25, 30 groups, historical groups, railroad groups, civic groups, engineering groups, and a couple of schools. I have been able to get into a couple of schools. There was some initial resistance to that. I think that they're so curriculum-based that they don't have a lot of time to get off the curriculum, but they've put some special days for me and together, and the kids do like it. I mean, they really get into it, and it's fun because they say, well, this is really not a kid's movie, right? It's a history movie, but the kids do relate to it. They've got all kinds of questions, and a lot of times they're smarter than the adults in terms of history, what was going on at that time.
Well, we had the Pony Express start in Sacramento. We had the Gold Rush. Do you think that the Transcontinental Railroad, do you think all those 3, they were kind of intertwined?
Absolutely they were, and the reason was that there was a transportation corridor, if you will. When the gold rush started, Sacramento, the gold miners came to San Francisco, took barges up the river to Sacramento, and then the wagon trails and trains. So, and somebody said they developed the necessary dredging, road building, and other skills so that when the railroad was what route would they take? And there were several different competing routes. One was through L.A., one was a northern route, that they picked Sacramento because the people did have the skill set to do it.
Take a call here. Good morning, caller. You're on the air. What's your question?
Yes. Hello, John. I'm really interested in the railroad's history, and I've heard about the Transcontinental whatever. But anyhow, I have a customer, and he has all these train sets, and they're really nice to look at, but he wants to display them in some manner that can be useful to everyone. I don't know if anyone can do that, but thank you.
Okay. You want to pick up on that?
Model trains?
Model
Actually,
trains.
right now, God, it could be ending this week. I got to be careful. But there was a great model train display at the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento. It kind of traced the history of the model railroads, and it's just fascinating. So there's a lot of, it's kind of turned into an older guy's hobby, if you will.
Yeah.
But the young kids still do love the trains, but there's a lot of older gentlemen that do have extensive train sets around. I'm not sure if there's places you can donate it to or not, but there's a lot of groups online, obviously, that connect these days with people.
I want to put the map up because this is the trail that you connect the dots from Sacramento all the way to Donner Summit, and actually all the way through to Utah in a way. There's the map, and you can look up there on the screen and kind of comment as we connect the dots ourselves here. You can look over here, Bill, whichever you want to do.
Right. Well, of course, old Sacramento's Sacramento, but then you go to Roseville, which has got a huge rail facility there today. There's lots to see there. Mm-hmm. Then up to Newcastle, the site of Newcastle Cut, which was one of the first major accomplishments. Auburn, site of Bloomer Cut. Colfax near Cape Horn, which is an incredible engineering site to see, and then Dutch Flat. You start to get in the mountains. At Cisco, there's literally an old ghost town that was a railroad center. They actually had a town. You can still see the foundations and everything. And on the other side of Cisco, there's a place called Lookout Mountain. You can go up there, Signal Peak, and there was a building they put up there that was to watch for fires that would build. And the most incredible view. You can see all the way to the Coast Range from there. And of course, Donner Summit, where the tunnels are, the massive granite tunnels built in 1867-68. They blasted through with black powder. Picks and shovels, the Chinese workers on there. It's just an incredible story. It's all still there to see today and walk through.
So, Bill, did it get more difficult as they climbed toward Donner Summit and Lake Tahoe? It got more difficult to blast and obviously using a pick and shovel, it became more and more difficult.
Yeah, the higher you got, really. And we got into really was pure granite in the Sierra, the hardest granite in the world, actually. So that was an incredible feat, and the engineering to get through it. Most of the tunnels I believe, were built on curves. Somehow they were able to figure out how to get through those tunnels on curves and make them meet.
Wow! Another call. Good morning. You're on the air. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, too. I just wanted to make a comment to that last caller. San Francisco and Sacramento both have train clubs that have stores that display trains.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not sure of the name, but
find them online.
Yeah.
You find those clubs online. Just Google railroad hobbyists, railroad collectors. All that stuff's up there.
Yep. Well, I appreciate the call. Happy New Year to you. And we all loved trains as a kid, right?
I think so, yeah. And kids still do.
I know. They still. My son, when he was first born, and then he was like 6 months, 8 months old, I bought him a train set. First thing I bought him. Yeah,
got one around the Christmas tree.
That's right. We're talking with Bill George. He's an author. He's a television producer. He is a railroad historian, my friends. He's got the book and the DVD out. It's called Rails, Tales, and Trails. It's how they built the Transcontinental Railroad from Sacramento all the way to Donner Summit and beyond. 436 MeTV option 11. Remember, turn down the sound. And Happy New Year. We're glad to be back here in 2014. Back in a moment.
1 Adam 12.
This is Adam 12. It stars Martin Milner as Officer Pete Malloy, Kent McCord as Officer Jim Reed.
1 Adam 12, roger.
This black and white patrol car has an overhead valve V8 engine. It develops 325 horsepower at 4,800 RPMs. It accelerates from 0 to 60 in 7 seconds. It has a top speed of 120 miles an hour. The automobile has 2 shotgun racks, one attached to the bottom portion of the front seat, one in the vehicle trunk.
You want me to drive?
Now on MeTV Fresno, Xfinity 187.
What they tried to do was they tried to balance the amount of cuts, the earth in the cuts, with the amount of fills that they had to produce. The idea is you don't want to haul that dirt very far before you dump it. They're using picks and shovels, hand tools, to carve out the mountains. They're blasting with black powder, with nitroglycerin. They're hand loading with the shovels and using the picks to break up the soils and load them into carts and wheelbarrows to move them for dumping. It's all handwork.
And so those are some of the tools that they use, the pick and shovel. They use blasting powder. There's no question about it. It was a very tough task, right, Bill?
Right, and again, all done by hand. They had to have the wagons come up, and they would load all the fill under the stuff they take out, put it on the wagons, and then dump it down the sides of ravines. There were 10 to 12,000 Chinese workers at one time working on this. They said it was like an anthill. You know, people were just everywhere. Doing all this work, tremendously coordinated. It took them about 4 years to get through this tough stretch of railroad, but with a lot of hard work and determination, they did it. And it's something that we should all be so proud of in our area. And it's, to me, it's really underappreciated. I wrote in a book that you go in the Sacramento airport and there's a big red rabbit there. There's nothing about our great transportation history. And you think, you know, here's where the Central Pacific began in the 1860s, folks.
Yeah.
Here's something that we can really be proud of. So that's what I'm trying to do, is raise awareness of this, working with the Railroad Museum, working with other historic groups to preserve this great asset that we have.
Before we get into the next piece of videotape that we're going to voice over here, and we're going to go through some of the mountains of the Sierra Nevada, is there a specific spot that people know, okay, this is where the first track was laid down in Old Sac?
They are, I believe, putting a marker in there now, and that's along the waterfront there in Old Sac, right near where the steamship is, so you can find it now.
Okay. Good morning, you're on Connect with Me, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, I was curious if Bill George knows about the amazing feat of engineering that was done in our own area of Fresno that started from the town of Pulaski and went all the way, which is now Friant, by the way.
Okay.
That went all the way to Big Creek, and that's how they hauled all the materials up in the mountains to build the Huntington Dam and the Shaver Dam. It's called the Jose Basin. It was the SJ&E Railroad that was put in from Pulaski to Big Creek in 180 days.
Wow.
With no heavy equipment. Are you familiar with that, Mr. George?
I am not familiar with that, but that'll be my next, I hope, I want to continue this project to go through from Sacramento down through the Tehachapi Loop, if you know where that is, over the Tehachapis, which is an engineering marvel in itself. So thanks for that story, and I'll do more research on that. I think that's great.
Hey, thanks for the call. I appreciate your interest very much. A lot of history here in the Central Valley pertaining to the road. And you know, and I go back to my kids, my son, when he was in elementary school, took a field trip up to the California State Railroad Museum in Old Sacramento, and hundreds of kids go up there from the Central Valley each year on school trips.
Yeah, they do a tremendous job there, and I'm proud to say that that the gentleman interviewed that you just showed, that's Kyle Wyatt, who's a curator and one of the, I mean, he's really the expert. I'm just the guy that came along and interviewed people and put the information.
But you're an expert
now. I'm getting there, I guess, but great guy, and they do sell the book and video there, so I'm happy they've been great supporters of this project, and I look forward to working with them in the future as we continue to expand the scope of this.
Yeah, my son came back from that field trip. I remember I didn't have a chance to go with him, but he was really excited. I mean, just to see all those old trains and some of the history. And we've got another piece of videotape. Let's roll it. And you know, it's really a historic route. Bill, you can narrate what we're looking at here.
This is what's called original grade, so it's 12 feet wide. You see it's abandoned. You can hike through that area right now. You see those big, so there's a fill. They filled that area in all the way. You can see down there's about 25 feet. That's all the way up through the foothills. You can find these places, and there again is the old grade. I was out there 2 days ago, found shards of pottery from probably the 1880s that had been discarded.
What trail is this? Is this like the old?
This is the old original grade, which in some cases is off where the modern route is. In some cases it's the same thing.
So how did you find this? How do you
Well, I found some old timers who had researched this and had been on this for years, and they basically took me there and showed me where they were and how to find them. And the interesting thing is that people hear about the Transcontinental Railroad, they hear about some of these old timers, and they contact them. People come from all over the world to see these sites, and I thought, well, why don't we connect the dots and so that people can know where they are.
So you did 2 years of research trying to find out where the original tracks were laid, the track beds.
Right. Just kind of, and the stories behind them, who did it, what year was it, all that type of stuff, and then again tying the local men in most cases together. They are men who.
And that's what the book and DVD are all about. Good morning. You're on Connect with Me. Your question?
Yes, sir. I was just watching Mr. George on Connect with Me.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to find out, about the railroads from Raymond to El Portal. When did they start construction on that?
I'm not familiar with that stretch of it. This film just deals with this original Central Pacific Railroad construction in the 1860s. So there are so many miles of railroad in California, and there's so many, actually, operating railroads, steam
Right.
engines that are still doing trips. Niles Canyon's one
Right.
of them, one in Folsom. So you can find all kinds of, if you research that online, and you can see all kinds of actually operating trips. One of the best ones is up in Virginia City, Nevada, the Virginia and Truckee Railroad. If you want to take a nice trip, it's like going back in time. They take the train from Carson City to Nevada City, and I was on it last September. Wild horses were ranging by us. It was just amazing, literally stepping back in time.
Well, now, this is part of the Transcontinental Railroad that
Right.
went from Sacramento all the way to the East Coast, right?
Right.
Eventually, it
Right.
got built, and it started in the capital city.
Yeah, there were actually two railroads, and it was designed as a race. So the Union Pacific started out of Omaha, the
Okay.
Central Pacific out of Sacramento, and they joined at Promontory. So you see that famous picture of the guys with champagne in their hands, and they're hanging,
Yes.
they're shaking hands across the divide. That's where those two railroads met. But it was the Central Pacific that I believe, and of course I'm a chauvinist being from Sacramento, but I believe that they had by far, the tougher job, the job that people said was impossible, that you couldn't do. Interestingly, the original architect of the railroad, Theodore Judah, was trying to raise money for it, and he went to San Francisco, and he met with San Franciscans, and they wouldn't invest in it. He came to Sacramento, he had a meeting, and Huntington, Crocker, Hopkins, those guys, all Stanford, all stepped in, put their money up to build this thing. And again, a couple times they said, what are we doing? We're crazy, this is not going to work. But eventually it did work. It made them fabulously wealthy, and it made our region fabulously wealthy.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Theodore Judah. He is the original architect of the Transcontinental Railroad, and he's the guy that started the whole idea, right?
He did. Well, I mean, there are many people, including politicians like Abraham Lincoln and others that were pushing for a railroad. Judah got the fever, and he was an early railroad engineer from New York. He came out here to California, surveyed several sites. And he was the one that, everybody has great ideas. Here's the guy that had the perspiration and the inspiration to make it happen. He actually died while the whole thing was being constructed.
He never saw it completed.
Never saw it completed.
Boy.
And there's one statue to his memory. It's in Old Sac. It's next to a subway, which I wish we'd do a little more to highlight it than putting poor Mr. Judah. But there's talk about relocating him. They're doing a lot of work at the railroad station down there in Old Sac, relocating it over there where people can really admire it.
A lot of history in our state of California, the Golden State, no question. And Bill George is our guest. He's an author, railroad historian, a TV producer. He produced this DVD, wrote this book recently. We'll tell you where you can get it online. Back with our show, 436 MeTV option 11. Turn down the sound. We're back with our program in a moment.
When you're looking for Whirlpool innovation and quality, who has the answers, the selection, the price? Ventura TV Appliance. With billions in nationwide appliance buying power, more than Home Depot and Best Buy combined, will help you save. Our low prices on Energy Star qualified Whirlpool appliances save you energy and money, and pay no interest on select models when paid in full within 12 months. Ventura TV Appliance, serving you since 1951.
This is the first steel rail that was laid on the Transcontinental Railroad for Central Pacific, and you can see the difference in shape, pear and T. This piece of pear rail was made in Boston by the Bay State Iron Company in 1863, came to California on a boat called Herald of the Morning, which is part of the Williams Line out of Boston. This piece of steel rail was made by the A.F. Terranwalk Company in 1871, and interestingly enough, it too came to California on the same boat, the Herald of the Morning, that the original rail came on. This is a replica of the Golden Spike, or the Gold Spike, if you will. This is wrought iron. When we went to steel in 1871, we went to steel spikes, about the same size. The difference being is that the steel spike has got what I would call a throat, as opposed to this not having a throat. This original spike is very close in that to the gold spike.
So why did they go to the steel spikes?
Well,
was
because
it more
steel was better
efficient?
than iron. I mean, they were using wrought iron, which is full of impurities and very heavy, very hard to work with, and somewhat brittle.
Okay.
So, the interesting thing about the railroad is that it's been continuous improvement since the time they built it. They would no sooner get a section built that they go back and straighten it out, strengthen it, and improve it with better materials and a better route.
Where did they find some of those artifacts? Just along the
They're
trails?
they're still there. Lots
They're scattered,
of them. They're
huh?
scattered around and in different places. So people have found them. They have found entire sets of Chinese pottery, Chinese china. You know, the teacups, the dishes, everything. And Chris Graves, the gentleman that was just interviewed there, found a lot of it and donated it to the State Railroad Museum and the California State Library.
If you do find some of those artifacts, what do you suggest people do with
I would
them?
leave it there. I wouldn't take it because it is...
Maybe donate it?
Well, I would just leave it alone. It's kind of fun to see them because you can see the patterns of construction and things of that nature, but I'd pretty much just leave it in the ground.
You know, I found your book really interesting. This is the book right here. But I got to read the safety warning and disclaimer.
Yes.
I was surprised to learn that a person of or vehicle is hit on average every 3 hours by a train. So basically, what you're doing, you're kind of putting a disclaimer in here for people to be careful,
very careful,
when they're investigating some of these trails.
And in our book, we explain where you can see the sites without having to walk anywhere near a live train, because those things derail. That's bad news. So you want to stay that. You want to be safety first all the time.
Right.
Stay away from them. There's so
But
many
there are
great
other dangers too, I'm sure.
Well, there's dangers in doing anything, you know.
Yeah.
I think. And but you have to be safe. There's great museums to go see and great curators of those museums in Dutch Flat. That's a great place to go to. And just walking around the town of Dutch Flat is a great thing.
Bloomer Cut, where's that located?
That's actually right in Auburn. And many people who live in Auburn don't even know it.
Let's go to the video. We've got a clip of that. You can talk about what is in Bloomer Cut.
Yeah, this was the first really significant challenge the railroad faced, and they had blast through it. And as you can see, it's very narrow. It still operates today. And there's what they did. They just went through there. All that stuff just held up there. They had to pull it all out by hand. It's an 800-foot long cut. And this we shot with a little drone, actually, because you can't even get a helicopter in there. That's how narrow it is, and shows again the original construction.
But they did
and how
this
they
all with a
blasted
pick
it
and
out.
shovel and blasting powder.
Right, exactly. And then just hauled it all out, and then would use it to fill in the next low spot.
Good morning. You're on Connect with Me, caller. Go ahead.
Hey, John.
Hey.
I was wondering how great the loss of life must have been.
Well,
what the loss of life
that's a very
of the workers.
Right.
There must have been a great loss of life, and also the Chinese. What kind of prejudice did they have to endure back then? I know that they were not treated well in this country at that time.
Well, there are several myths about all that. First of all, as far as we know, there were something like 100 construction deaths on this whole route. So it wasn't like thousands of people were being killed. It was very well organized. In terms of the Chinese were somewhat independent contractors. They were hired by Chinese companies. They would come in and work. They were paid $30 a month in gold. At the same time, a Union private, this is the time of the Civil War, a Union private was paid $13 in greenbacks. So the Chinese were, I mean, there was prejudice, there's no doubt. The Chinese did a wonderful job. This could not have been done without Chinese labor and the dedication and heroism those people showed.
Running out of time, where can they get the book and the DVD?
Well, they can get it at the Railroad Museum in Sacramento or my website, which is transcoshow.com.
Okay. We want to show one more piece of video before we go. It's called Tunnel 6. We have a freeze frame of that. It is what it looks like today. Bill, what is Tunnel 6? And there's a picture of it right there as it stands today.
Right. This is the Summit Tunnel. So this is the top of Donner Summit off the old Highway 40. And there's actually a couple tunnels up there as well as snow sheds. And you can see what it looks like today. You can put your hand right in the place where they blasted.
This was taken back in the 1800s, this photo here, I believe, right? This one here? This
Yes,
is the old photo.
And that was to show how they photographed it. And they did have photographers with them. They lit that scene up with a mirror to get the interior shot of the tunnel. So they dragged a huge mirror up there, reflected sunlight into the tunnel, and took the picture.
30 seconds left. What's the significance of this tunnel here?
Well, it's an epic engineering achievement. And, nobody thought they could do it again. They had to blast through the solid granite. It's on a curve. They were working from actually 3 different sides. One crew in the middle, one on each end, and they met. They were 1 inch off perfection when the 3 sides met. The 3 work crews met in the middle.
Bill, sadly, we're out of time.
Thanks, John.
Boy, get the book, get the DVD. It's good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Engineering marvel here in our country, the Transcontinental Railroad. The book and the DVD. Bill George, thank you much for being here. That's our show for today. Happy New Year. We're back with another edition of Connect with Me on MeTV Fresno tomorrow.